Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Craig Fulton from Evergreen. I'm an advisor here helping MSP owners make sure they get the most value out of their business. And I'm excited to be joined with
Jamison West. Thanks for having me.
How you doing, man? What are you doing now? What are you up to?
Right now, I've got kind of three things going on. A strategic coach, kind of founder at Connect Strat, doing a lot of strategic coaching and work with MSPs, which we'll talk about more. Partnered with a couple co-founders with Time Zest, doing scheduling for MSPs, and then also doing outsourced talent from the Philippines for MSPs called MSP Talent. So,
wow, incredible. You're always doing lots of things. Like, I met you, I think it was about 15 years ago in Seattle. You had an MSP there, JWCS. And the reason I wanted to have you here today is you have an incredible journey. And then we're going to get into something you did, which is sitting over your left shoulder there. That I think it's important for everyone to hear because I've seen people go through M&A. I've been kind of in it, but not like I've been more of the entrepreneur gone through it. And I understand something we're going to talk about, but let's get in your journey. All right. You were one of the first people I ever saw acquire another business, and that was X Bar in Seattle. Brad Benner, great guy. Talk me through, wherever you want to start. Talk about the business, what made you do M&A, and.
Well, I started JWCS. It's funny that you remember the name.
Oh yeah, Jamison West Consulting Services.
Right. I think that was in 1995 or something like that. I started that business, right? And it was a lifestyle business, lots of fun. Just to realize I didn't have to have a job or work for anybody. But started to grow it. I met actually a bunch of industry people, Arlen Sorensen, Brad Benner, and others at this conference called SMB Nation in Seattle in 2015 or 2016 or something like that. And so Brad and I realized that, we kind of had the same attitude towards friendly co-opetition. And so we just started to compare notes and got to know each other pretty well. And he was struggling to grow. I was growing. I got a little more intentional after that conference. Okay, I can do this. I'll stop playing around. Had kids, responsibility. All right, time to grow my business. I was having more success than he was at growing it. He was just kind of bumping into some things. And then in early 2010, we were at lunch and I was like, he told me he was going to I'm going to focus on growth. I was like, well, I'm ready to buy my first business. He goes, done. And I was like, what? It took us 3 weeks to close. That was like early June 2010, and we closed on July 1st, 2010. It took like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got my legs under me with acquisitions and did 3 more over the next 22 months. So 4 companies in 22 months. So about 40 people went from like 9 people to 40 people that quickly. Yeah. Lots of horror stories. Culture, which has kind of become my main thing. But the 2 things I talk about most are money and culture. Right. I'm less of an ops guy, sales guy, do it all because you have to, but it's more money and people. So lots of great stories, lots of learnings, lots of sleepless nights. Yeah. But then had to kind of recover from a pretty bad situation. My last acquisition wasn't so good. Right. And but we did all the right things, and we kind of tightened our belts, and we ended up selling in 2016. So that was kind of our story and the journey of that business. So
yeah. Well, so and I've been I kind of sat on the sidelines and I hyped you and cheered you along the way, and I love when you rebranded Arturian and really found your stride and did some cool things. But you learn a lot of lessons along the way that I think that's what I wanted to get into. And for those tuned in watching this, this is an important element. So, but tell me, I think you said you did 4 acquisitions there.
About 3.5. One had just happened right before I acquired him. Like a few days later, I acquired both. They hadn't even started. So it was
like when you acquired X Bar, what was your big takeaway from there? What was your big okay, that's the thing.
Yeah. I think my big takeaway, and I probably learned less off the X Bar one than the rest because it was the easiest one. You learn more when it all goes wrong. Right. X Bar I learned that the relationships with the clients were really, really critical. Like the new clients wouldn't suddenly listen to me. I'm not the one they trusted. So it took a while to build some of that rapport. And some of them were just the fact that even the name was changing was too much for them, right? So some of them left because it wasn't Brad anymore, right? And it was like, okay, it's not X Bar anymore. So it's like, I don't know about that name. I don't know why it was called X Bar. I don't remember. But Brad's actually the one who encouraged me to rebrand to Arterian. That didn't shake anybody or rebrand, but when the ownership changed, that ruffled some feathers, right? So that was interesting. That's probably my biggest learning was the customer relationship.
Yeah, man, you're almost setting me up to drop some good evergreen stuff, but I won't. Well, and then and then you've gone through some others and then you sold your own. So let's get into this. You wrote a great book and it's called The Emotional Side of Selling a Small Business. Right. And, again, I've only been in Evergreen a short period, but I've been in the ConnectWise IT Nation community for a long time. Saw a lot of people sell their businesses and I watch people go through things where they're like, wait, what is my value statement today? And then tomorrow they feel good. And then the next day they're not sure. And what did I do? And go through all this. But I think a lot of people don't want to talk about that, right? It's kind of like, I don't want people to see that I might have that side to me and vulnerable. And so talk me through what made you say like, you know what, I need to write a book on this because I love it.
Yeah. As I was going through the sale of Arterian, I was going through everything you just described, and I realized that the resources that were out there for me to lean on, rely on, and learn from were predominantly about what's your valuation, what are the financial metrics, what are the legal things you need to do. There were resources, books, and otherwise to tell me about all the functional, tactical things about going through the sale of a business. I really couldn't find a resource that said, oh, by the way, forget all that for a minute. It's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be hard. Nobody. And I had a couple people that, from my then HTG days, back my peer group, Arlen Sorensen specifically, who wrote the foreword to the book, who really did understand all of that stuff and help walk me through it and make me understand that this was normal and it was going to be hard and all this. So, but after I was done, I took about a year and I'd been thinking about it. It's like, why? Everybody, this is a thing. People are starting to sell. People are getting tired. People want to do something else. And I just wanted to provide that resource. So, and I love the way that like Patrick Lencioni and some of these others write books where I was like, let me do a fable. It's about 2/3 of the book. And then the last third's a few use cases, like people are like, oh yeah, me too. And where they tell their journey and give one big learning. And then we just kind of mushed it all together and made a great little fable out of it.
Yeah, I think it's good because, look, people say all the time, oh, it's business, it's not personal. And we could do our best to think that way, but in small business, it's personal. That's why I love it, because it's like, it's people helping people, creating jobs for people, supporting their communities. And you touch on a great thing about XBAR, like the customers don't like disruption because it's like, whoa, I got used to what's going on there, which again, another reason why I love Evergreen. We try and like not disrupt anything. Don't change the brand, don't change the leadership, don't change the way you interact with customers. And but yeah, you're so right about, how many times when you were going through that process did you want to change your mind that you thought this is going to be bad? I'm going to regret this. Don't do it.
Well, I think a lot, and and even to this day, you second guess a little bit, right? I mean, I'm glad I'm out of that business personally. I've done some other things that are kind of more my genius zone, but I think that as you go through that, you realize that you get emotionally invested in the outcome. You draw this line of what you think it's going to be, but you start to walk back from it because you've already committed. You start telling people before it happens, which means now you've exposed yourself. All these things happen. Everybody's gone through all this stuff. And by the end, in the 24th hour, something could happen and you've got it, like it kind of did to me. Fortunately, the buyer, high integrity, we sat down, we worked it out, but I'll tell you, I had 15 minutes of panic where I was like, little bit of ink buried somewhere in the agreement that my attorney was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
And we both looked at it a little closer and went, uh-oh, and it
Yeah.
was not good.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
but we fixed it. And those things, I mean, they just happen, right? And nothing's done until ink hits paper, but everything that precedes that, the decision-making process, you get emotionally invested
right.
and hopeful. And some people do I have a client that just went through a sale who, yes, went through some of that, but nowhere near to the degree I did. Some people are able to separate themselves a little more from the business, but
Yeah.
I think when you've spent 15, 20 years building a business and it's kind of become your identity,
Yeah.
it's like selling your baby. It's not
Yeah.
it just isn't something you do, right? Nobody
Yeah.
preps.
Uh, I won't even try and fake it. It's nothing I've ever done. I think the closest I've come is sell a house, which is what you described is probably 20 times harder and like that stressful. But being there with Arnie Bellini, as he sold something, I mean, I see it, I get it, and just raising awareness to it is big. So I appreciate the book and I recommend it to everybody. And so what I'd like you to do is let's dive into some advice you have for someone, right? So, someone's thinking it's time, or maybe they're like, oh, I don't know if it is. Like, what's some advice you would give someone in that situation?
Well, I think the first thing is they need to align what they want their personal outcome to what the business is going to do for them. Too many of
Right.
these entrepreneurs who've been doing this forever have really just made a job for themselves. I mean, you hear this all the time,
Yeah.
but getting them to mentally separate the fact that their business, there's emotion tied to it, but getting a coach, what I do to get them to separate and say, yes, but this is an asset, it's an investment.
Right.
So it's a combination of what do you want to do as a job and what do you want to do with your investment.
Yeah.
And if they hate their job, but their investment's worth the right amount for them to switch and do something else, good. Let's have it. So just getting them to put things in those buckets is important.
Right.
And then if they get to that conclusion that yes, exiting the business through a sale is the right thing to do they want to stay? Do they want to? We have to. Now it's how do you figure out where it's worth it and where it's
Yeah.
not worth it? How do you draw that line and stick to that line? And that
Yeah.
is, and getting them very, very clear on what a go, no go scenario looks like. And so that they don't end up with regrets. I think that that's really important as well. You hate to see
Yeah.
somebody pour 20 years of their life into something and
Yeah.
then leave it and feel like they made a mistake, right?
Right. Yeah. And I've seen that firsthand, right? They do it, and then whatever decision they made, something goes wrong with the business, and they run into an old customer at the grocery store and they're like, no, man, it's not been good. But yeah, you're dead on there with you need to think those things through. Again, another reason why I love being at Evergreen, we give a lot of flexibility. It's like if the owner wants to stay, great, we can change the structure of the deal. And we have a whole nother video that where Sydney Hockett walks through that. But that's awesome. So if someone did say, okay, I think it's time, right? And look, I'll come back to the house metaphor. It's like I don't look at my house as an investment right now. I look at it as this is a great place, provides shelter, building memories with my kids, and like, but yes, one day it's gonna happen where I'm like, okay, I need to get my money out of this.
Yep.
I think a lot of people might be there with their business too. So um what would you say is the first best step someone could take when they think like, okay, it's time?
I think the very first thing they should probably do is work with an advisor, like somebody
Okay.
who really understands. It could be a coach, somebody who's been with it. It could be, I mean, that depends on how people listen and what they want out
Yeah.
of who's around them. But I, you very, very quickly feel alone on an island when you start to have these thoughts, right? So
Okay.
it's one of those things where somebody who can kind of see the forest through the trees, who isn't attached to the outcome, and can start thinking through the pieces. People don't understand what the tax implications are. People don't
Right.
understand what the so for me, the second I started to think about it is like, hey, I need to maximize my opportunity. I need to have some conversations. I need to make sure I have somebody who's helped me think through this in a more disconnected way.
Yeah.
That's been really important. And then just make sure your house is in order, right? So
Yeah.
if you're starting to think of it, if you're suddenly like, whoa, I need to get out now, that's a different deal. But if
Yeah.
we really help people is go, look, you're going to exit your company someday, one way or another. Let's start figuring out let's be intentional about it. Let's plan
Yeah.
for it. Because if you have your house in order in terms of not only EBITDA, but everything else, the fundamentally in the business is running well, your
Right.
multiple, your value goes way up. And
Yeah.
a lot of people just get sick of it and have an implosion, and then they're selling at the very wrong time for their
Right.
business, right?
Yeah. And then there's regret. No one ever wants that, right?
Yeah.
I think the best outcome is always, a fair thing that everyone, walks away from, like, feel good about it. And look, I know, Connect Strat, I remember you, making the announcement of that, and I know you guys are doing great things for people. So I appreciate what you do for the community. We'll wrap this up, man. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here. If you're tuned in, you see the book there, you might want to check it out, because that, again, the mental health and the emotional side of things is stuff that people have a hard time talking about. I'm always open to it. Jamison, any parting words?
No, I just, I'm glad that you had me on. Thank you. It's
Yeah,
fun to watch what's happening in the space right now. I think
yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity. So always good to catch up.
All right. And if you see this man out there at an event, stop and say hi. He's always got some great takeaway. I appreciate you, Jameson, and I appreciate those tuned in. We'll see you next time.